to have such a wonderful audience. Thanks so much for coming out. So we will get started now. As I said earlier, my name is Carolyn and I'm with the Career Connections team at the Insurance Institute of Canada. And I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of all of the lands that we are on today. While we're hosting this event on a virtual platform, let's take a moment to acknowledge the stewards and the importance of the lands which we each call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in our relationships with and to fostering our own understanding of Indigenous peoples' culture. From coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all of the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land on Turtle Island home. Please take a moment of reflection to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and to consider how we can, each in our own way, move forward in this spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Okay, so if anyone is interested, we also have closed captioning available during this Zoom call. So you can go show captions and you're able to change the language as well in case anyone is maybe a francophone, you'd like to follow along in French. That's a really great option for us. So today we have three panelists who are going to share a little bit about their roles and what it's like to be an underwriter and to work with underwriters in the property and casualty industry. So we have Noah Choden, who's a senior underwriting specialist environmental with Liberty Mutual Canada. We have Alan Hollinsworth, Chief Sales Officer, Ontario and Atlantic Canada region for sports and entertainment practice leader with Hub Ontario. And then we also have Laura Donaldson, underwriting technical specialist, commercial property and casualty with Wawanesa Insurance. So we are going to get started, and our first question should hopefully be an easy one for you all. Tell us a little bit about yourself and about your role. So Noah, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, sure. So currently, I'm a senior underwriting specialist in the environmental team at Liberty. So in my role, I look at pollution risk. The coverage can be for company location, like for example, a manufacturing site, or it can be for the work that they do offsite as contractors. So previous to Liberty, I was at Zurich for 7.5 years. I started out as underwriting assistant and moved through different teams and landed into the senior underwriting role. Really happy to be here today, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Noah. So Noah might be a little bit humble as well, but she is also the 2023 Emerging Leader Award recipient from the Insurance Institute of Canada. So we can give her a round of applause. I had the pleasure of seeing her at Convocation the other week, so that's really great.
Thank you.
Okay, so we will pass it over to Laura now.
Great, thank you. So my name's Laura Donaldson. I'm an underwriting technical specialist at Wawanesa. I handle the referrals and approvals for increased capacity for the commercial property team. In my role, I also look at training, claims collaboration, and there's quite a few other duties that are assigned to me. I was awarded the 5-star underwriter recognition in 2022 from the Insurance Business Magazine, and I became an instructor with the Institute just over a year ago as well. I absolutely love what I do. I love our industry and my career. I have nothing but great things to say about it, and I look forward to our discussion today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Laura. And finally, we'll hear from Alan.
Yeah, so I started in the industry almost 30 years ago at a company called Guardian Insurance, which was on the underwriting side. I didn't quite move into underwriting. I started out actually in the mailroom there. My family had emigrated, as I mentioned earlier, from Ireland, and I just wanted to get into the work environment. So got a position within the mailroom, was there for a year and a little bit, and then I moved into the underwriting department in the special risks department at Guardian. I was there for another 2 years. On nights and weekends, I was volunteering in the event space while taking some insurance courses. For me, the stars aligned when a position became available on the insurance brokerage side at a company called Hunter Rowell in their entertainment specialty unit. I applied, got the job. So joined Hunter Rowell, I guess 25 years ago. Hunter Rowell merged with Keelty Munson Beatty to form HKMB probably about 3 weeks after I joined Hunter Rowell. So I've been with, and we were acquired by Hub back in 2007. So from predecessor firm to today, I'm 25 years with our firm. Over the years, I've taken on, in addition to, I sort of started in an entry-level role. I moved into the leadership role for the entertainment practice. We expanded it to sports and entertainment. We're now one of the largest sports and entertainment brokers in the country. And on the side, I was taking on sort of various sales leadership roles across the Ontario region. And I became the chief sales officer. So that's my primary role right now, is driving sales and growth for Hub Ontario and Atlantic. I started that job on April 1st, 2020. So an interesting time to start a job, when everybody went into the remote working environment. But we've got a great team here, and every year the team posts amazing results. So it's been a terrific ride.
That's great. Yeah, I'm excited for the panel today because everyone has such different backgrounds, and I think we'll hear some really nice sort of intersectionality on how everyone works in the industry and within their roles. But we need to go back to the beginning. That's where we always want to start. And so my question is, how did you get started in insurance? So we've heard a little bit about sort of where you work and what you do, but I want to know, why did you pick insurance? And I think we're going to reverse, and we will start with Alan today. How did you get into the industry? Was there something that really drew you to it, or was it by chance?
Yeah, I guess, jumped the gun in my intro there in kind of going through a little bit of this, but it was opportunity to get into. Actually, my dad was in the business for 41 years, working in the risk services side. So it was part of our family dynamic. Insurance was always around, and he had brothers and sisters that were also in the business. And it was an uncle of mine who got me the opportunity with Guardian. And then it was, again, stars aligning with the fact that I had a personal interest in sports and entertainment. I was able to get a role that fed the passion that I had for that sector. And as I said, it's 25 years later. I couldn't think of another industry to want to be a part of. It's been tremendous from an opportunities perspective for me personally, for my family. There's always a new avenue that you can sort of explore, and it's been, as I said, it's given me a very, very good life. So that's sort of my initial background. But I think, been able to sort of mirror and partner up something that I had a passion for from a personal interest perspective, but then also having a desire to learn about, underwriting a risk, because I find that and I'll talk about this a little bit later, but we pre-underwrite a risk before we send it to underwriters. We have to sort of understand and wrap our heads around the exposure before presenting it. That's something that really excites me.
Yeah, I think family is a common route. So a lot of people enter the industry that same way. Are you recruiting any of your other family members to join the industry now?
It's funny you say that. I have I actually, again, sports and entertainment. I've a couple of daughters. One is in the sports management program at a university, and my second is about to graduate and get into the arts, the business arts and a business arts program. So they're both sort of following a track from having the advantage of getting to go to some pretty cool things over the years.
Yeah.
And so never say never. Never say never. It's a good.
Yes.
We shall see.
We'll get them yet. Just send
Yeah,
them my way. And okay.
exactly.
All right. And Laura, how about you?
So I hate the saying when we all say that we fell into insurance, but literally, like, I went and got my bachelor's of accounting, and the year I was graduating, the chartered accountant firms in the town were only hiring every second year for the chartered accountant students coming in. So I needed to find something for a year until I could apply into the program the following year. And I got a job at an insurance broker's office as a secretary, and then very quickly went and got my REBO license. That was when I was living up in North Bay. My family relocated to the London area about a year and a half later, and I jumped to the company side at that point in time. Never looked back from that stage, and went through right from the underwriting assistant all the way up to a senior, and then in the last couple of years, the underwriting technical specialist. And Yeah, I mean, I've been part of some phenomenal events and various things over the years through the insurance industry, and I love it. It's constantly changing. There's constantly the ability to learn something new, and that's what I love about the industry.
And being an underwriter sounds much cooler than being an accountant, right?
Yes. Yes.
We won't tell. We love our accountant friends. We
Yes.
won't we won't tell them we said that. But yeah,
Yes,
that's great. And I'm sure that you're still using a lot of that same accounting knowledge in your career path that you ended up following.
for sure. Yes.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, Noah, how about you?
So for me, I have a background in finance. So at the time, I knew that I didn't want to go into accounting or into banking. And I remember stumbling on this article that talked about the commercial insurance sector because I never had any family members that were part of the industry. So kind of reading through it, and one of the things that interested me was becoming an underwriter because I felt like a lot of the traits that it highlighted was some that were my strengths. So I ended up actually enrolling myself in the CIP and started doing that and started as an underwriting assistant because I knew that that would be the way to kind of track myself into an underwriting role. So that's the way I got into it. And I think the stability that the insurance industry offers, along with the diverse roles, I think those were kind of interesting to me.
That's great. So I just want to ask you about a few things there. You said that you read an article
Yes.
about the industry, and that's kind of how you got started. So I have a question for our chat. What are some good resources for people who are maybe looking to learn more about the industry? So this might be someone who's maybe considering joining the industry, or it could be someone who's perhaps sort of a new entrant and is looking to increase their knowledge. So please go into the chat and share some of your resources for those who are looking to learn more. I'm just typing this out. And Noah, I actually know from your bio that you worked in not-for-profit before
Yeah.
you came to insurance. And so my question for you is, when people think of insurance, they probably don't actually think of how much the industry really does give back to the different communities in which we serve. And so I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. Can you tell us more about the ways that the insurance industry gives back? Some of them might not be quite as obvious as some of the other ones.
Yeah, so there are ones like partnerships with Junior Achievement, where the employees will go into schools and educate the students on finance or budgeting, or even mentor the students on a business plan that they're going to come into fruition. Other ways is that I find volunteering itself is such a subjective matter. It really matters to the individual that's volunteering what they're volunteering for. So I think in recognition of that, a lot of companies even have like paid day off, or for instance, like day to invest. So that way that individual can choose a charity of their choice or not for profit of their choice to volunteer for. And I think that's really empowering for people because it's one thing to volunteer together as a group for a team activity, but when you allow people to volunteer for things that they're really passionate about, I think people go further in that endeavor. But also for myself, I found that volunteering through Insurance Institute as a Career Connections ambassador, it's been pretty amazing, and I think in the workforce itself, we need a lot of diverse background in order to move as the talent crunch is there. So I think those are like different things that the Insurance Institute does, but also there are other associations like WIC, for example, that do other things for different causes. So there's various avenues to volunteer if that's something that you really want to look at.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. For me, I often think about last summer when we had, some pretty big natural catastrophes. So the one that I really think of is some of the fires in BC. And all over my LinkedIn and in the news, I was seeing different articles and posts from claims professionals in the industry saying, "We are located at this hotel. Come in. We're going to get you set up if you've had some property damage or if you're needing any help, we're here for you right now." So I think oftentimes the industry is one of the first people on the ground after an incident, and they're really there to help. So something else that you often hear is about some of the different mutuals that really do pride themselves on giving back to their communities as well. And we happen to have Laura here, who has spent quite a bit of her career working at some of the different mutuals. So I wanted to ask you, Laura, what is it that you think is sort of special about mutuals, and why have you stayed there within your career? So what has really kept you in that mutual space?
So I think a lot of it, like what Noah had discussed with the giving back to the community, that's a big part of it. They hold a different perspective on how they operate. There's a bit more flexibility with respect to decision making because there's not the shareholders that are expecting that dividend payout at the end of the day. They can invest the profits back into the communities where they're around, or maybe where there's something going on that the need is there, or also into the company for the benefits of their members or their customers, as opposed to paying those dividends back. In my day-to-day operations, being a mutual, it is a smaller company. I do have a lot of direct connection with the executive office, which is great. I'm able to offer some additional flexibility in my decisions that I make with the floor. I feel more heard as an employee because we have a lot of input on the changes within the operations that may occur. We're very much a family type atmosphere as well, which is fantastic. We all know each other well. We do things together. We volunteer for together. We had a lot of tree building or tree planting sessions last year that we got into, or a local charity that was important to the individual. But at the end of the day, like, everything comes down to benefiting the member when it comes to a mutual, and it's a different atmosphere, and I do love the mutual side.
Hmm. That's great. Thank you. So, just a reminder, if anyone has any questions for our panelists, please go ahead and enter them into the chat, and I will read them out and ask them at the appropriate time. I've also asked you all in the chat if you can give any other examples of some different ways that the industry gives back. Love to hear what you have to say about that. So we're going to pass it over to Alan now. And, what I've noticed since I've started working within the industry is that insurance professionals always have the best party stories. So if you're out with a group of insurance professionals, they have, these really interesting stories that we get to hear about. And sometimes they can't say the names of all the parties that are involved. So, Alan, I want to ask you, can you give us an example of a larger risk that you might have worked on recently, or something that was kind of, really interesting for you throughout your career? Maybe it's your party story, maybe it's something that's happened sort of more recently, pardon me. And I'd also love to hear a little bit of the perspective of sort of, when you're working on that risk, what are you thinking about from the underwriter's considerations, and sort of how are you going to be sort of positioning that and gathering some of that information?
Yeah, so the scope of the type of clients that we work with range from everything from very small events to quite large. And that's on the sporting, live event, music festival, film production. So they all have their own sort of certain levels of complexity. Example I could give you, we worked on a large multi-day sporting event that we insured for a number of years, that had all kinds of auxiliary events to around it with the idea being it's enhancing the fan experience. Some of those auxiliary events included things like interactive activities, dinners, concerts, other types of event-based things that weren't sort of core to what the main risk that the insurer was picking up on. So for us, each of these auxiliary events kind of need a different level of attention. So it's important that we spend the time kind of understanding the scope of each of these elements of the event in order to address, appropriate exposures and present it in a way that the insurer is going to feel comfortable taking it on. So from my perspective, and I had a bit of an underwriting background, I do like to get into the weeds on understanding the sort of the mechanics of how something goes from being an empty field to a staged event to back to an empty field, and everything that's sort of in between. So I sort of work with my mindset and what we have with my team. And by the way, my team, for the most part, has been with me for many, many years. They're amazing. They all do a phenomenal job at what they do. And that's a big thing, is to surround yourself with some really great people. And I've been very fortunate that way. But we tried to answer the underwriters' questions before they asked them. So You know, if you think of, again, breaking down an event that's got a concert element or a party or a fundraiser or something that's part of it, you know, the natural things, what could go wrong? Could you have a situation that's a very negative situation that could lead to a claim? Our job is to try to address some potential concerns in advance so that the underwriter feels comfortable that what they're taking on these things have been thought through. So, you know, I find us having to play a role in pre-underwriting before we go to the underwriters. And that makes the whole sort of partnership collaboration piece on accepting the risk go a lot easier and a lot smoother. So and that comes with, again, asking a lot of questions. And in some scenarios, we're asking questions of our clients that they may not have thought through. They may not have thought about, well, yeah, what do we do in this situation? So asking the question sort of triggers that sort of thought process to get them prepared to be able to you know, address the risk and exposure, mitigate it out of the gate, and then have a story for the insurer to feel comfortable with taking on the risk. But yeah, we've seen situations where, particularly on those fan experience type connected events to a major event, where we had one where we had a company come in to do a display that involved motocross, and it was just use this part of the parking lot, won't be an issue, you know, off you go type thing. And when we got there, we realized that it wasn't, you know, the crowd wasn't going to be properly protected should something go wrong. So we had to sort of, you know, work with the local the staff on the ground to make sure that proper fencing was brought in, and you know, the crowd was kept back at a safe distance. So that does happen from time to time. Fortunately, most of the people who put on big events are really good at what they do, so they don't sort of need that sort of, but from time to time, there's going to be situations where we have to, you know, apply our thought process. And again, I think a lot of it goes back to me having a little bit of an underwriting background and asking those questions so that the underwriter can feel safe.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Yeah. So you touched on quite a bit of the skills that you would be using and sort of what the underwriters could be looking for them to identify specific areas. I think a lot of times when people think of an underwriter, they think of someone who's just sort of doing analysis. And when they think of a broker, they think of more that sort of relationship builder who's going out, maybe attending some of these events. But the underwriter side also, it's very important to be building some of those relationships. And so I think, Alan, you might be able to give us some tips today on, you know, when we're developing our skills for sort of our career, building those relationships are very important, whether you're a broker, underwriter claims, whether it's with internal stakeholders and partners that you might be working with or with external ones. So let's hear a little bit from you because this is a skill set that is applicable to everyone in the industry. How are you building those relationships? What are some tips or suggestions that you might have for someone who's perhaps starting out their career and is looking to develop some of those skills?
So I think, you know, Laura touched on it earlier that, you know, there's new situations that come across your desk that you maybe never seen before. And again, you know, 20 plus years in the business, I still sort of refer to what we do as an everyday apprenticeship. You're going to see something that's kind of new. So in order to be able to address that, you have to commit to being a lifelong learner. And that's around understanding, you know, the product that we sell or we arrange, for sure. And it's, you know, we have a gentleman that's been in our you know Los Angeles office for 50 plus years, or he's been in the business for 50 plus years, and he still talks about, every time we see him, it talks about read the wording, get into the wording, ask questions. If something doesn't make sense, find out what it is so you understand what it is you're selling. So that's one piece of the lifelong learning, is to understand the product, but then also commit to developing skill sets. And those skill sets are everything from product knowledge, obviously, but selling skills, personal development. Are there courses that you can take or people you can learn from that'll help you around engaging with people, interacting with people, managing, leading, mentoring people? For me, those things are, you know, for some it comes naturally, and for others it takes some investment of personal time to be able to learn how to do it and how to do it well. For me, a huge part of what you know, where we've had success over the years is the relationship we have with our underwriting partners, and that's an investment on both ends, right? To kind of get to know each other on a personal level, build trust. Trust is a huge thing when between the broker and the underwriter relationship. But really sort of aligning to make sure that when you present something, they look at it and say, I trust that they've thought this through. You know, they put some good thought process to it. And what they're telling me is something that I can feel comfortable with. But that doesn't happen just by luck. That happens by an investment of and a commitment to time around developing that relationship piece.
That's great. Thank you, Alan. I'm going to flip that same question to Laura and Noah. What skills do you think that an underwriter needs to be developing, and what sort of suggestions or tips might you have for them to work on that development? So perhaps Laura, we'll start with you.
For sure. And yeah, I mean, Alan spoke to it with the trust is a huge part. Having that open communication, pick up the phone. You know, if you have questions on a particular account, sometimes you can go back and forth a million times in emails and it just gets frustrating on both ends. So it's having that connection with your brokers. The industry, as large as we are across the country, is also very small in whatever area you work with. People move companies, so the connections you build at one company will carry you throughout your career. I work with a senior VP, she's a CEO now, that I've actually worked with at all three companies that I've been at. And it just happens that that's how our career progression has gone along. But I've had some great relationships with my brokers. You know, when they have something rush come in on a Friday afternoon, they're picking up the phone and calling you because they know you're going to be able to help them and get the response back to them so they can help their client at the end of the day. And overall, it's a win-win for both sides. You know, you do what you can within your guidelines, and it's having that relationship with your broker. Attending the industry events is a great opportunity to get to know them, to, you know, maybe chit chat on a personal level. There's curling functions, there's golf, there's, you know, the convention in Toronto, which is a fantastic time to attend if you ever get the opportunity. But they're all opportunities to develop those relationships, and which will only strengthen like your underwriting career, your broker career, claims, whichever side you decide to go on.
And Laura, can I just add too? So, you know, with when the relationship's strong, it doesn't necessarily mean that the underwriter is going to accept everything, every single scenario that you present to them. And there may be a hard no and a tough conversation, but at the end of it, you can still stay connected. And, you know, when the next one comes up, it's sort of water under a bridge. But you don't necessarily get to that if the relationship is not at that high trust respect level. So even if
Absolutely.
it's not always just because you've got a good rapport with somebody. I mean, I have scenarios with underwriters that I'm very close with that we've had some, you know, didn't always agree on sort of where to land, but it didn't mean that the relationship was going to be impacted on a long-term basis. And that's because we made that investment of developing that trust and respect for each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. Noah, is there anything you might want to add? Perhaps it's something, you know, maybe more of a technical type skill.
I think I guess like the one thing is like and being analytical is important because you do go through a lot of data on a day-to-day basis, but then also understanding asking questions, but why are you asking those questions? And besides that, I think not technical, but I think you just need to understand that there are going to be mistakes. You're going to make mistakes, and I think being in an environment that kind of fosters that, and also understanding you don't know everything, and having people you'll always have people around you as you're kind of growing into your career, or like even if you're a veteran, there's always things you don't know. So I think just having that and understanding that people are not expecting perfection out of you. I think that's very, very important because nobody is going to grow in an environment that feels unsafe, and where you're not feeling unsafe, you're not going to do your best work. So I think it's really important to understand that it's okay to not know.
That's a great tip. Yeah, and you always have a, you know, a team that you can go to and ask questions. Wonderful. So I think that kind of ties into the discussion around career progression. So that's something that we often talk about quite a bit at the Institute. And I know that, you know, for me, I often am going to different post secondaries and talking to people who are new to the industry or working in a different field and looking to switch. And it's a common question for them. We also hear now from Gen Z that, they're looking for that progression. They want to see where their career's going to go. And it is really important to have those discussions early on so that people can understand what a path might look for them. And, just as we talked about the skills that you need to develop to be progressing along that path. So our next question is for all of you. Whoever wants to go first can take that one. So, what does career progression look like at your organization for someone who, some of you might give an example of underwriting, some of you might give something else, but what would that sort of career progression possibly look like? And this is a good chance for someone who's on the call who's maybe sort of looking to develop their career to start dreaming and thinking, what do I want and how am I going to get there and how can I make a plan? Because it is your career. You have to take charge of it. No one else is going to do it for you. So, who would like to start with some sample career progression for their company?
I can start from the company side. Sure. So, I mean, depending on your experience coming in the door from an underwriting side, a lot of times you would start at the assistant or junior underwriter level.
Yep.
And then we have level 1, 2, 3 instead of junior, intermediate, senior. But even at the underwriting level, if you decide that you want to get into a different department, like it's very fluid to move to different areas. You can get into data analytics, specialty lines, the quality assurance team, claims, product specialist, wording reviews. Like there's so many different areas when it comes to the insurance industry working on the company side. And it all depends where your passion is. There's leadership roles. The specialist, the UTS, and then even from there, you can look at, are you interested more in the personal line side of stuff? Is it more the commercial lines? I've always worked with commercial property and love this side of the business, so I'm a little biased that way. But there's so many different opportunities within the company and so many different ways to progress. You can also look at job shadowing. So, if you come in maybe on the underwriter side, but you're interested maybe in claims, you can approach your supervisor about job shadowing a different department. You can get involved in events such as the panels here at the Insurance Institute or becoming an instructor. Like there's so many ways and so many opportunities within the insurance career that you can go.
That's great. Thank you. Noah, do you have any thoughts on this?
I think starting out, you can always go the underwriting assistant route. Mine was underwriting assistant. That's how I kind of progressed through my career. The one thing is, I guess, like be patient. It's going to sometimes take time, but at the same time, if there are opportunities that come, make sure you raise your hand and say that you'd like a shot. I think the one thing that my mentor kind of taught me like early on was it's very important to ask. Like if you never ask for something, you're not going to get. So unless you raise your hand and say that you'd like a shot at it, no one's going to give it to you on a platter, right? So I think that's why the one thing that will take you ahead is to understand that there's patience, but there's also knowing when to raise your hand and go about. But also when you get that shot, make sure that you make the best out of it, do your best work. And also for me, I actually just changed jobs. I was at Zurich before and I moved into Liberty. So I'm still in touch with a lot of my colleagues and I think Zurich is a great company. So understanding that throughout your career you might be changing companies or changing roles, but don't burn those bridges.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very small industry and you will run across each other like majority of events or even maybe they're even going to be at your new job. So just remember that as you progress through your career.
Yeah, that's a really important tip, I think, especially within the insurance industry because it is such a tight-knit community. So that's great. And Alan, how about you? This one might look a little bit different.
Not really. I mean, it sort of aligns with what Laura and Noah had said as far as, the entry level coming in an assistant role. And for us, it's assistant in the Toronto region anyway, assistant associate into an account manager and, VP and above type thing. And that's generally like running units. My advice to younger people has always been don't rush progression. Be ready to kind of step into that next role at the appropriate time. Stay on course. We all have, the ambitions to move into roles that we see, that's ahead of us, but are we ready from a kind of career development to step into that? So when the time's right, it'll be the time. But you also, to Noah's point, you got to put your hand up and say, I'm interested in this. I remember hearing a line a few years ago around don't let the opportunities outpace your ambition. So you've got to be ambitious in the sense and want to take on these opportunities, but the opportunities are there. They're absolutely there. And it's, we have people that it started in a particular team, didn't work out for them, moved to a different because of their skill sets didn't align with, be it the busyness of the book of business they looked after or the sector that they were working with, moved into a different specialty sector and are killing it. So, there's lots of tremendous opportunities once you sort of stay the course and be focused on kind of doing what the job you're doing really well. You also, another piece of advice is, you want to put yourself in a position to be able to train the person who's going to come in to take your role when you move on to another role within the company. And you can't do that unless you've got that job down at a high level, right? So really commit to knowing all the pieces so that when you pass the baton on, you're in a good position to put that person in the best position to excel in the role.
Yeah, that's great. Can anyone give examples of, Alan, you sort of touched on it a bit there, but of a time when maybe your career path isn't always vertical, where you might take some lateral moves and how that can benefit? Does anyone have any thoughts?
I could talk about so in my sales leadership role, I was a regional sales leader in our Central Ontario region, which was kind of in the Oakville to Niagara region. That was my first sort of venture into a sales leadership role. I kind of took a lateral role into becoming the sales leader in Toronto. It was a much bigger region, but still it was a similar role. But that then put me in the best position to be sort of the next in line for the chief sales officer role when it became available. And I kind of sort of saw that as been part of that progression. So
Yeah.
that certainly worked for me, or worked out well for me.
That's great. Thank you. Laura?
I would say I had the same. Like when I was a senior underwriter, I did take a couple lateral moves to two different companies. I worked at 3, and it was just that exact. It was for the opportunity that I perceived was available when I was taking that lateral move. And then also I did hop for the management team that was at that particular company as well, because it was something that I trusted and I valued their opinion and their approach
Yeah.
as
You
well.
guys, so you guys were playing chess, not checkers with those moves.
Yes.
Wonderful. Yeah. So Laura, while we have you, I think we'll stick on this theme of career and skills development. I know that you teach CIP courses, and you had mentioned that it's something that you find really rewarding, and you really enjoy being able to sort of share some of that knowledge and coach the next generation of talent and insurance professionals. So, what is one piece of advice you would give to someone who is sort of just starting out their career, or perhaps is, just starting their career in insurance?
It's tough to just come up with one, but find an area that you're passionate about, that you're excited about, something that you love doing, and be curious, both when you're looking at accounts and your career. Pay attention to, what's going on in the world, and particularly when it comes to underwriting, like start of COVID when all the restaurants were shutting down, you were not wanting to jump out and write a restaurant. It just wasn't something you wanted to put on the books, right? But it's having that knowledge of what's going on around you. And as Noah spoke to earlier, like put up your hands. If you're looking for to advance or to explore somewhere different, look at job shadowing, join, a panel for something, look at putting your hand up for projects that come away. Like you have to be your biggest advocate and get the skills that you need in order to move to that next level. And even having those frank conversations with your supervisor. I want to get to a junior level, I want to get to an intermediate or senior. What do I have to do in order to get to that route? Or is there courses I could take? The CIP program is phenomenal. It's got a ton of information in the courses that you take. And then from there, you can get your FCIP, your CRM. There are various other designations that you can obtain to expand your knowledge base. But, we spend a lot of our lifetime working together with the people you like, make it enjoyable, and find a group that you connect with.
Great. Okay. Noah, is there anything you would add?
I guess understanding that there's not one perfect route, like everyone has different career progression, and what it might look like for one person is not necessarily what it would look like for you. So I think just embracing that and then just understanding as you go through, you might find that your career might be different than what you thought it would be. I never thought I would be in environmental, to be honest. I knew that I wanted to be an underwriter, but I happened to get into environmental. So I think it's something that you have to think about that your progression is not going to mirror people around you. So just I think that's what's going to happen along the way.
That's great. Thank you. And Alan, do you have any advice for someone who's sort of just starting out?
I mean, I'd echo Laura's comment on, find something that feeds your passion. I was so fortunate to fall into something that with the opportunity, and I guess going back to the previous question on a lateral move, moving from underwriting assistant to account assistant, underwriting assistant with Guardian to account assistant at Hunter Rowell at the time, it was a lateral move for me, but I was moving into a practice area that I had a huge passion for in entertainment and sports. This was stuff that on weekends and evenings I was committing my own personal time to. So it didn't really seem like work when you've got something that you love, right? When you're working on something you love. So from that end, but then once you commit to it, it's an ongoing commitment in the sense that you're constantly learning about what's going on within that business sector, so that when you have conversations with clients or underwriters, it's almost like you're speaking to it in a sense that you work in that industry, which every day, which you kind of do, but you don't. You're in the insurance industry, so I think committing to that and if you can, that's ideal. And for some, they may be in a position where they don't have a rooted passion for it, but you can develop a passion for it. And you can really separate yourself from others that are in similar roles if again you're able to speak at a level to both clients on the broker side or underwriters that shows that you have a deep interest in whatever the sector is that you're either pursuing or servicing.
That's great. Thank you. So I see that we have some audience questions, so that's wonderful. And one of them actually ties in really nicely with a question I had planned to ask Noah. So, as we mentioned at the top of the call, Noah was honored as the CIP Society's 2023 Emerging Leader. And so, Noah, I wanted to ask you, what are some of the leadership qualities and skills that you would consider important for an underwriter to develop? And the chat question that we had was, what are some skills that are important to develop for being successful in underwriting? So, what do you think? What skills does an underwriter, or what leadership qualities does an underwriter need to develop?
I think there's always the technical side, which you can always develop as you go through your career, and a lot of it is you learn by doing. It's something new to a lot of people, but I think being empathetic towards others, it is a people business. So you have to understand and try to put yourself in others' shoes. Like whether you're working with internal team members, you're often working with other underwriters from different departments, or you're working with a broker. Try to be understanding of that. I think the curiosity aspect is probably big too, because as you go through big data, unless you have the curiosity to really learn and also try to figure out why it's this way or why it's that way, I think that also will take you far. There's a lot of things to learn within the industry, and you're always learning new things, going through new risk, and going through even new relationships with others. So just having that curiosity will definitely help you. And I think lastly, just collaborative. I think those are like important. I think there's the technical side all the time, but people often forget that like my first impression of the insurance industry when I was trying to get into underwriting was, oh, it's going to be like a desk, it's going to be this, but you realize that's just one part of your role. You're not going, your day looks very different day to day. So just accepting that everything's not going to be the same every day. So I
Hmm.
think those are the probably the top qualities that I would think.
Yeah, that's great. So I'm loving the questions we have in the chat. So I'm actually going to pick out a couple more and ask them. So Noah, I'm going to keep you in the spotlight and we're going to ask you, what are some specific challenges that an underwriter has to face?
So there are a lot of different challenges that you might come across, but I think one of the things is sometimes things get really busy. Your desk might be more overwhelmed. You might feel overwhelmed with your desk, but understanding that and then prioritizing according to timeline and also kind of leaning on brokers as your partner and kind of explaining to them that, oh, I know you need it by this day, but can I have this extra day? Nobody's going to be mad at you or yell at you. Just you just pick up the phone, talk to the broker and or like whoever and tell them that you need more time if you need it. Um, I think that's one thing. And then sometimes I think Alan spoke to this earlier too about decline. So sometimes I think the toughest conversations are declining certain things. Even if you have a really great relationship with someone and you have built that relationship over time, the way you handle certain situation can really impact those relationship. And I think declining is one of those. So if you know you're going to decline something or if you're going to say no to something, say it early on so that the broker is prepared and understands that and it has adequate time to go into the market if they need to. So I think those two are like probably the biggest challenges from me at least.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Noah. I think we're going to take advantage of having Alan here and we're going to ask him, what is the best way to decline? So if you have a risk and the underwriter is coming back to you and saying, sorry, we can't write this, what are some things that would sort of soften the blow for you, or what would you kind of be looking for in that situation from the underwriter?
Explain the logic, so if you can explain the logic where we can align on, I get it, I get where you're coming from in this and I respect that. And it could be simply we've got restrictions on for whatever treaty restrictions, or it's just not a class, or we don't have the appetite for it, whatever it is. If that logic is presented, a good insurance broker will accept that and will be, respectful of that. To just a simple decline without explanation or just a couple of lines of here's kind of my reasoning behind it, that can sometimes cause some challenges from a relationship perspective. But again, most of the markets we work with are phenomenal with giving you that context. So you leave the conversation going, I didn't get what I was hoping for, but I'm not upset because I've got this logic that's been explained to me.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So I'm curious now, Alan, we're staying with you. From the flip side, what are you doing when you're identifying and assessing a risk to present it to the underwriter? So what are you doing to make it easier for the underwriter now so that you don't get declined?
Yeah, so I mentioned this earlier. We're answering the questions before they ask them. So you're looking at it from the mindset. You're almost putting yourself in the mindset of the underwriter. So if I was underwriting this risk, these are the things I'd have an issue with. So if we can say, in the presentation of the risk through a submission, we're highlighting this is happening, but here's why you shouldn't, or you don't need to be worried in a sense, right? They've done this, they've transferred the risk here, they've brought in whatever it is. I mean, if it's an event, it's, transferred security, they've got certificates of insurance from the subcontractors they've hired, their contracts read a certain way. So it's really kind of trying to give that peace of mind. It's not to say that it eliminates all risk that comes with the event. I mean, that's the reason why they buy insurance. But if it's the things that could keep an underwriter up at night around concern around what's been presented, if you can try to address that in a way where you're answering the questions before they ask them, that tends to help in the process.
Good, that's great. Laura, is there anything you would add to that as a technical
Can we
specialist?
copy you, Alan, for like all of the brokers? And that's just it. Like from an underwriting standpoint, when we get an account, we want to know like all those things. Like you noted, sure, there's exposures with absolutely everything, but what have you done to mitigate the loss or to prevent, something from occurring? And even when you were talking about the sports and entertainment and the dirt bikes or whatever they were bringing in, like, yeah, just to take, that extra step, put the fence up so the crowd's behind it, something to that effect, right? But
Yeah.
that's great. Like, and that's what, from an underwriting side, when you have those relationships with your brokers, absolutely, you tend to get some more of that information, and you learn which brokers, you could, I don't want to say trust, but for the most part, like Alan, if I was working with him on a sports one, he's going out, I know he's going to ask all the questions and have all the checks done so that by the time it gets to my desk, I can just look at pricing it. And is this a class we can do? And is this something we can cover and get it back to him as quick as possible? Because I know he's taken those extra steps in the background, right? So, yeah, it's just developing those relationships with your brokers or whoever you're working with so that you're making sure you're getting that information at the get-go.
And part of the reason for going the extra step is that, you want this is a career, right? This is something that's going to go for many, many years. It's not a just in the moment land this so that, I hit a certain number within this year. This is something that ultimately your brand, it feeds your brand. You get more leads because you're going that extra mile, you're taking that extra level. So I think it's important to view it from that perspective, that it's not just I need to get this one deal on to check a box for my annual target. This is part of a longer play. And in some situations, we've made decisions to say we just can't work with you because, as a client, if you're not giving us the information we need, potentially that exposes us and we don't want to have that risk. So, and I also don't want to put my, underwriting partners, have them take on a risk because something, corners have been cut or not, the attention to detail is somewhat limited.
Mhm. That's great. Yeah. So, really hearing that theme of relationship building coming through. We have a couple more questions in the chat that I'm going to try and get to. We're going to run out of time on those questions, though. But one that I hear quite often, and I think is kind of the opposite of what we've been talking about with relationship building, is does AI have any effect on the underwriting process as it is? So, this is an interesting topic. Does anyone have any thoughts on this that they can share with us?
Go ahead, Noah.
Uh, so I think like I spoke before, there's a lot of data and there's a lot of manual input sometimes. So I think companies oftentimes like invest a lot of in technology to ensure that we're innovative. And I think that's something that's a priority for a lot of different organizations because as we kind of advance and also there are different, I mean, it is a highly regulated industry. So it is important to keep keep data securely protected, and also the way you do that. So sometimes it might take time, but a lot of organizations have project teams that might take on different things, whether it's like the data that's coming through the brokers, spreadsheet data, or what the underwriter pipeline looks like. Pipeline meaning like if they're working on like a new business or renewals, for example. So because it's so much data and it's just you as an individual underwriter. So I think technology is something that's always prioritized. I think that's what I would say. But yeah,
Hmm.
go ahead, Laura.
That's great.
So I've come across it a few different ways. At the prior company I was working at, they had AI. So when we got a broker submission in from the broker's office, the AI would literally input it into their system. So it just takes out some of that data coding, like Noah talked about in the background. So by the time it gets to your desk as an underwriter, you're able to just underwrite the file, review the information that's presented to you when it's ready to quote and get out. More recently, we're coming across Chat GPT in the industry, and there is some guidelines that we've come out with as to when it can be used and when it can't be used. And then you also need to take into account the information that's coming through it. It's not always accurate. So as a new underwriter, you don't always want to be reliant on that information. You need
Yeah.
to learn and absorb and figure out, okay, is this telling me what I'm looking to know, or is it not, right? And I know there's some new lawsuits out with respect to plagiarism of it. So there's a whole, we've kind of taken the approach that they really shouldn't be going that route at all and be talking to the seniors and the other leaders if they have questions on particular accounts. But it is something that's, you know, out there, and we find some of the new generation coming up is definitely looking to jump in and help them with it. So, I mean, it definitely plays a part, but I don't think you could ever take the full underwriting out of the picture. Like, it's not something that our
Yeah.
jobs would ever be replaced, because you still need that interaction. People still, they thrive off of that human connection. So you're never going to have the brokers replaced by, you know, online insurance only. Like, people will still want that connection with the brokers, and they still want the connection with the underwriter to call.
That's very
Yeah.
good to hear, Laura, from my perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, it's there to make our jobs a little bit easier, so helping with some of that data entry and submission, but one thing that the automation can never replace is those relationships, and that's kind of the theme that I'm picking out of this discussion today that we've had, is that building those relationships is really, really important, whether you're on the broker side, whether you're an underwriter. And you know, we didn't get to talk about claims as much today, but that's also very much a theme there as well. So we are at time, so I'm just going to do a quick wrap up. I'll give you each 30 seconds to offer any final thoughts or piece of advice that you would have on a career in underwriting or working with an underwriter for our audience. So, Laura, we'll stick with you and we'll start off with you.
So, despite what you may hear from other people, honestly, insurance is exciting. There's a ton of different ventures, like different ways you can go with it. The risks we see, the operations we hear of, the claim scenarios we come across, industry events that we generally have a blast at, the constant ability to learn and advance in the insurance industry. And there are a ton of opportunities. The sky is the limit, depending on what you want to do and what you're looking for.
That's great. Thank you. And Laura, Noah, pardon me, how about you? 30-second
Yeah,
tip, piece of
30
advice.
seconds. That's hard. I think just in underwriting, there's a lot of things you'll come across. And I think sometimes you just think about data and being analytical, but I think there's also, like Laura said, like it's an exciting industry. There are a lot of things for you. So just keep an open mind. And as you're progressing through your career, you'll meet a lot of great people. You'll become even lifelong friends. So it's an exciting industry full of great people. So I think just understanding that, and you will learn as you go. So don't worry as you start.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Alan, we're going to wrap up with you.
Yeah, and 30 seconds is impossible. So I'm going to keep it really short and just say ditto. I mean, exactly what Laura and Noah just said. You know, it's a tremendous industry. There's so many different avenues you can take when you're within, you know, get into the industry, and it's exciting. It's changing. There's, you know, the world's evolving so quickly. So with that, again, it gives us new things to sort of have to wrap our heads around, which keep the industry, which keep what we do really, really, really interesting. So um, you know, in a way, it's still untapped, you know, as far as what the career opportunities are. There's still so much that you know the outside world doesn't know about our business, but we're very fortunate to be in it. It's given us all a really good life. So
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. So, thank you to everyone who joined us today. We really appreciate it. And a special thank you to Alan, Laura, and Noah for taking time out of their day just to speak to you. So, I hope everyone enjoyed it. Take care. And if you have any questions, Career Connections and the Insurance Institute are here to help you. Thank you.
thank you, Carol.
Thank you.
Bye.
Everybody.
Thanks.